All right, today we're putting on our explorer hats. We're going to become cartographers, but not of land or sea. We're going to map the huge, constantly expanding world of scientific research to figure out how to find the ideas that really, truly matter.
I mean, it's a massive challenge, right? You have literally millions of new studies coming out every single year. It's an ocean of information. So in all of that, how do you spot the next big thing? How can you tell the difference between a passing fad and a genuinely game-changing wave of research? That's the big question we're tackling today. So first things first, why even bother making these maps? Well, to put it simply, it's all about finding the important signals that are buried in an unbelievable amount of noise. It's about stepping back so we can see the grand story of how knowledge grows and changes.
And of course, there's a formal name for this kind of map making: research trends analysis. It sounds complicated, but it's really just a methodical way of looking at research to see two key things. First, how a field changes over time. That's the temporal part. And second, how different ideas and researchers are all connected. That's the structural part. You know, it's kind of like watching a city grow over the decades, while also mapping out all its hidden subway lines.
And this brings us to a really cool idea, the wave of research. See, science doesn't always move forward in a nice, neat line. It often has these huge surges of collective focus on one topic, usually sparked by a big innovation or a global crisis or even a shift in policy. I mean, just think about the wave of mRNA research. It was building quietly for years, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and that wave turned into an absolute tsunami. Trend analysis helps us see those powerful waves while they're still forming. Okay, so if we're the explorers trying to chart these intellectual territories, what are we using? What's in our toolkit? Let's pop the hood and take a look at the key instruments that make this all possible. These are the big ones, the core tools of the trade. They range from pretty straightforward statistical methods to complex data mining, and of course, visualizations that turn all this data into maps we can actually understand. We're just going to zoom in on a couple of these to see how they give us a totally unique view of the knowledge landscape.
First up, you've got bibliometrics. This is really the numbers game of research. It looks at stuff like how many papers are being published on a topic, who's working with whom, which papers are getting cited the most. It's all about using statistics to reveal the large-scale patterns, the very architecture of an entire scientific field. But, and this is a huge but, there's a critical warning label that comes with this tool. You have to be so careful not to confuse volume with significance. Just because a topic is getting a ton of publications doesn't automatically mean it's the most important thing happening. These numbers always need context. It's not just about counting, it's about understanding what you're counting.
All right, next up in the toolkit is data mining. Now, this is where we bring in the heavy machinery. We're talking about algorithms that can churn through thousands or even millions of research articles to find hidden themes and connections, stuff that no single human could ever hope to spot. This is trend detection on a massive industrial scale. And like any super powerful tool, you've got to use it wisely. These algorithms are absolutely fantastic for spotting potential patterns and generating new ideas, but sometimes they can see patterns that aren't actually there, kind of like seeing shapes in the clouds. That's why you always need a human expert in the loop to validate the findings and tell the real insights apart from the digital mirages.
So, we have our tools. We're ready to go exploring. What happens when we actually use them? What kind of new intellectual worlds do we discover? What do these maps actually show us?
At the end of the day, it all comes down to one thing: patterns. Finding these recurring shapes and movements in the data is the absolute backbone of all trend interpretation. It shows us how ideas rise and fall, how different topics connect, and how entire communities of researchers work together. And this slide does a brilliant job of breaking down two of the key patterns we often find. On one side, you've got your hot topics. These things can explode out of nowhere, often fueled by societal urgency or just plain old hype. But they run the risk of creating a bandwagon effect. On the other side, you have growth areas. These are different. They show a steady, sustained increase in research. It's less of a flash in the pan and more of a slow burn, signaling a really durable, fundamental shift in a field.
Our maps also reveal the key geography of a field. Every discipline has a research core. Think of this as the main continent. It's the stable, foundational knowledge that everything else is built on. Then you have the emerging topics. These are like exciting new islands forming off the coast where all the new energy is gathering. And finally, you have novelty, those rare, truly original ideas that push the entire frontier of the map outwards.
So what's the whole point of this? what's the end game for all this mapping? Well, it isn't just about creating a cool historical record of where science has been. It's about using those maps to chart a course for where we're going next.
The ultimate goal is to move from just having data to having genuine foresight. And that's a 4-step journey. You start by finding the patterns in the data. Then, you figure out what their real-world impact is. That lets you start forecasting where things might go. But the final and most crucial step is to actually yield insight, to turn all that analysis into smart, actionable advice for the people who make decisions.
Because in the end, the value of this work really boils down to 3 things. Yield, did it actually produce any useful, actionable insights? Quality, is the analysis solid and trustworthy? And impact, did it actually have an influence beyond just being another publication? That's what separates the good analysis from the great analysis. And this brings us to one last really profound idea, the Zeitgeist. It's a German word that basically means the spirit of the times. The thing is, these maps of knowledge don't exist in a vacuum. They're deeply shaped by the culture and the intellectual climate around them, and in turn, they help shape that climate. Understanding the Zeitgeist is the key to understanding why certain questions suddenly become so urgent right here and right now. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. We're getting incredibly good at mapping the history of ideas, at seeing exactly where we've been. But does that knowledge give us the power and maybe the wisdom to consciously steer the future of discovery? That is the ultimate challenge and the incredible promise of all this work.